A cop pulls over a car, but when he sees the sign on her arm, he turns pale. On a quiet evening in early autumn, Officer Matthew Cole sat alone in his patrol car at the edge of a suburban road. He had been a police officer for 10 years and was used to the regular pace of the job, stopping traffic, settling small arguments, and dealing with the occasional reckless driver. But tonight felt unusually slow. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, watching the headlights of passing cars. His partner was sick, so Matthew was working alone. He felt uneasy, as if something unexpected might happen. His radio crackled with a routine call, nothing urgent. The streets were calm, with winding roads and trees lining them. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Matthew sighed, wishing he could finish his shift and go home to a quiet dinner. Then a late model sedan caught his attention. It approached an intersection and instead of slowing at the amber light, it surged forward as the light turned red, narrowly missing a van entering from across the street. Matthew's eyes narrowed. This was a clear violation. He turned on his cruiser's engine and engaged his lights, pulling away from the curb. He activated his siren, intending to stop the offender before anyone got hurt. The sedan responded by speeding up slightly. Matthew frowned, accelerating to keep pace. "Driver, pull over immediately," he used his speaker to command. The car's brake lights flickered, but it continued. Matthew felt tension coil in his chest as he prepared to position his vehicle for a safe forced stop if necessary. Then, unexpectedly, the sedan slowed and pulled onto the shoulder. Matthew approached the car cautiously, adrenaline humming in his veins. He expected the worst. A defiant driver, maybe intoxicated, perhaps something more dangerous. He kept a hand near his holster. The interior dome light came on as he tapped on the window. The tinted glass slid down, revealing a young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, with large dark eyes set in a pale, drawn face. She gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands. "Good evening, ma'am," Matthew began, keeping his voice firm but calm. "Do you know why I've stopped you?" He noticed her eyes were rimmed with redness, as if she had been crying. She didn't speak right away, just nodded slightly, her lower lip quivering. The silence hummed thick in the air. "I need your license and registration," he instructed. She fumbled with her purse, her movements shaky. Matthew noticed a child's booster seat in the back. A small teddy bear rolled onto the floor as she rummaged. So she had kids. His frustration at her reckless driving spiked, endangering a child by running a red light. He would let her know how irresponsible that was. As she handed over her license, he read her name, Sarah Hall. He stepped back to run her information on his mobile terminal. No outstanding warrants, just a few minor infractions. Still, ignoring a red light was serious. He returned to the window. "Miss Hall," he began, his voice stern, "you nearly caused an accident. There's no excuse for that. Is there a reason why you're in such a hurry?" Sarah swallowed hard, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. She opened her mouth, but no words came. It was then that Matthew's gaze drifted downward. Her short-sleeved blouse had slipped slightly up on her arm, revealing a thin silver medical bracelet. Engraved on it was a small emblem and words he recognized instantly. He felt his stomach drop. The sign was unmistakable, a symbol he associated with a severe heart condition. His father had worn a similar bracelet after a massive heart attack years ago. Matthew knew what that bracelet meant. Life-saving medical information if she collapsed, instructions for emergency responders. He had learned to recognize it in his training. Patients with certain conditions wore these to alert medics. The presence of that bracelet changed everything. Suddenly, his frustration ebbed, replaced by concern. He turned pale. His authoritative posture softened. This wasn't just a reckless driver. This was someone possibly under severe distress. Maybe she had experienced a dizzy spell or chest pain, something that caused her to panic and run a red light. Or maybe she was rushing home to get medication or to a hospital. "Ma'am," Matthew said gently, "I see your medical alert bracelet. Are you feeling okay? Do you need help?" He spoke quietly, aware that a different approach was needed. Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not well," she said weakly. "I was rushing to pick up my daughter from my sister's house. My heart condition flared up, and I felt faint. I went through the red light without thinking. I'm sorry, I just want to be with my child. I can't afford treatments and miss my last checkup. Things have been hard." She lowered her head in shame. "I know I made a mistake. You must think I'm reckless." Matthew's heart ached for her. He remembered his father's struggle with heart disease and recognized Sarah's pleading tone. His anger faded, replaced by empathy. "I don't think you're reckless," he said softly. "I think you're scared, and I understand that." She looked up, surprised. "This doesn't excuse running a red light. Someone could have been hurt," he continued. "Do you need medical attention right now?" "No," she replied. "I have medication at home. I panicked and shouldn't have driven like that, especially with my child's seat in the back." Matthew took a deep breath. He could issue a fine, but she needed compassion. "Let's get you out of the car for a moment." He guided her to the back of his cruiser, where they stood under the soft glow of the streetlights. "I can't ignore the traffic violation, but let's find a way to ensure you're safe on the road." Sarah shook her head, tears flowing anew. I have no one else. My sister watches my child sometimes, but she can't always help. My job barely covers rent and my medication. I know I shouldn't have driven like that. I was afraid of losing custody if I didn't get my daughter on time. The stress, the fear, I guess I lost my head. Matthew's heart ached. He wondered what small step he could take to ease her burden. He remembered a local community program that offered assistance to patients with chronic conditions. Maybe he could refer her. He thought about the hospital's financial aid programs and realized he could at least show her some kindness now. He looked into her tear-filled eyes. This is what we'll do, Miss Hall. I'll write a minimal ticket, just a small warning fine, so we have a record of the violation, but I won't charge you heavily. In return, I ask you to promise you'll never drive in that state again. If you feel faint or stressed, pull over and call someone. Don't risk it. Sarah nodded, relief washing over her face. Thank you, officer. I promise I'll do better. He then gently asked for her phone number. Sarah hesitated, confused. I know a local nonprofit that helps with medical bills and might advise on grants for treatment, he explained. I can text you their contact. They've helped patients like my father. Her eyes widened. You do that for me? Matthew smiled faintly. My father had heart issues. Without people helping, we wouldn't have managed. Consider this me paying forward the kindness we received. Sarah choked back sobs. In that moment, a siren wailed in the distance, and a cat darted across the nearby lawn. Life went on around them, but here, under the streetlight, they reached an understanding. The prejudice Matthew first felt, he was initially upset and prepared to scold, faded into empathy once he saw that silver bracelet on her arm. It symbolized vulnerability and hardship, not arrogance. He led her back to her car and quietly placed a small slip of paper, her warning ticket, on the dashboard. It hurt him to write even that, but rules were rules. Still, it was a fraction of what it could have been. Before leaving, he handed her a note with the nonprofit's name and a short message of encouragement. I'm not supposed to do this as an officer, but as a human being, I can't just leave you struggling. His voice caught slightly. Get the help you need for you and your child. If I see you again, I hope it's under better circumstances. Sarah took the note, her tears drying. I'll never forget your kindness. She rolled down her sleeve, hiding the bracelet that revealed so much. She promised again to be careful. Matthew walked back to his cruiser. As he pulled away, he saw her car's headlights turn on, driving off slowly and cautiously. He imagined her making safer choices now, finding help, and giving her child a better future. The next morning, Matthew ended his shift and went home. He felt different, lighter. He had started the night bored, perhaps ready to dish out punishment to some reckless driver. Instead, he ended up connecting with a scared young mother. It reminded him why he joined the police force, to protect, not just punish. Over the following weeks, Matthew occasionally wondered if Sarah had reached out to the nonprofit, if she got financial help, and if her son's condition improved. He hoped so. He needed to believe that a small act of empathy might ripple forward, improving lives. In a world full of misunderstandings, a tiny bridge of kindness had formed between them on that quiet road. Months went by. One Sunday afternoon, while patrolling near a farmer's market, Officer Matthew Cole heard someone call his name. He turned to see Sarah smiling and looking healthy, with her child beside her. She still wore her medical bracelet, but now had a hospital band showing she had received treatment. Sarah approached him, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Officer Cole, I took your advice. The nonprofit helped me get treatment, and now I'm stable. My child is doing well in school, and I have a better schedule. Thank you for changing my life that night. Matthew knelt to greet her child, who smiled brightly. He stood up and tipped his hat. I'm glad you're both well. Thank you for sharing this with me. As they parted, Sarah disappeared into the crowd, and Matthew returned to his cruiser, feeling happy. He realized that being kind that night had helped Sarah find a better path. He understood that behind every traffic violation could be a story of struggle. The memory of Sarah's tearful face and her bracelet reminded him that compassion is just as important as enforcing the law. Sometimes, the best way to serve and protect is to listen and offer help.